Hey y'all, Nick Pomeroy here with PR Equipment in Kearns, Texas. Hey, today we're out in the field. We wanted to kind of do a little bit more educational video. One of our core values here at PR Equipment is that we're big on education. And so we want to show you how to run one of our sprayers. But this actually also works for a lot of other brands of sprayers, kind of all based on that speed and pressure based system. And so with most Pasture sprayers, they're not full flow control. And so they utilize what's called speed and pressure, or a speed and pressure based system to regulate your flow. And more or less what that means is there's two things you can control, which is the pressure of the sprayer and the speed at which we pull it. And that, in accordance with the tips, the orifices on the tips is going to give us a flow rate, and then that speed is going to give us that area. And so now we've covered, whatever that GPA, that gallons per acre, is going to be. A lot of times for a sprayer like this happens to be a boom sprayer. If it was a boom-less sprayer, we typically recommend a little bit different flow. On a boom style sprayer, 10 to 15 gallons an acre is pretty solid. On a boomless sprayer, I tend to recommend that we always try to stay 15 gallons a minute or higher. And that's just because we want to get a lot of those little droplets over all those tiny little plants. And part of it kind of depends upon whether you're spraying a broadleaf or you're spraying something else, maybe stickers or something like that, or putting out fertilizer. That also depends or will make a little bit of a change to what you're trying to do as far as gallons per acre and droplet size and things like that. But today we want to keep it pretty simple. We want to talk about a few things when it comes to hooking up your sprayer, and then we're going to talk a little bit about operation and show you what that looks like. So a couple things I wanted to go over first is we've got this sprayer hooked up. I've got about 100 gallons of water in here, or our herbicide, and keep that in mind a little bit as far as herbicide. So anything that's water-based, anything that you're going to mix with water is going to be based off of this. If you were spraying a straight liquid fertilizer, something a little denser than water, there's a conversion factor for that, and we can talk about that later. But in this video, we just want to talk about the most common, which is we're going to spray something water-based. And so this here is just water. So most of your herbicides, everything is going to be done just like that. So this is a best way sprayer. You might have one of our ag spray sprayers, which the control valve will look a little bit different, but the process is the same. As far as the only thing that's really going to be different is just how the layout of the valve is, but the operation will be the same. You may have another brand of sprayer, and they're all going to be more or less, it's all the same theory of operation. So, but on this best way sprayer, one of the nice things they do is they incorporate all the valves out here, so there's no valves under the tank. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we need to get liquid to the pump, right? Before we go firing this thing up, we need to make sure that we have everything's open and we're flowing. So here we've got our valve, and we're gonna turn that to open, and that's gonna allow that product to flow through the suction side of that hose. And I did this and I actually created a problem for us because I wanted to show you maybe a common thing that we get calls about is maybe the first time you're using your sprayer, or maybe it's the first time of the year, and we'll get a call that says, hey, I can't, it's not spraying, or I can't build pressure, or whatever the case may be, and they might even think that their pump has gone bad. And that's not typically the case. It does happen, but what we see the most is maybe kind of an airlock or a cavitation setup. And so I kind of created one of the most common problems that we see here, and that's it's obviously exacerbated if the level of the tank is lower. So if you're not spraying a full tank, that's going to make this worse. But in any situation, we can see this. And so you see my suction hose, it comes up and then makes this upward loop and then goes down to the pump. And the issue we have here is air will get caught up here, and it will stay trapped and will airlock that pump and never be able to catch prime. And so I always recommend it doesn't have to stay like this, but until you catch prime, we need to route that down like this. And so there's a couple different ways to do that, but that's going to allow that flow to not have an air bubble. So it kind of just does this escalating thing, and it'll flow a little bit better, and that'll help you catch prime quicker. Which that's obviously always the goal. But we've got our pump hooked up to our PTO shaft. We've got our hose routed the way we want to see it. We've got our valve on. And one other thing, just a little side note about troubleshooting. If you're not able to catching prime, or if you're not building pressure, one of the easiest things to check is to take your strainer off and see if you're getting flow there. Obviously your strainer could be plugged, but maybe there's a valve or something pinched or whatnot. And so you're able to kind of come in here, and you can pull this off a little ways, and you can see we've got plenty of flow. Now, probably the smart way to do this is let's shut that off first. Let's open that up. And so now you can see we've got plenty of product. Now, hey, if you guys are using chemicals, please take your safety precautions, wear your gloves, wear your safety glasses or whatever, you know, follow the labels on the chemicals, be safe with this stuff. But it's water, so we can be a little bit more lax. But we can see that our strainer is clear, our bowl's clean, everything's good. You can even kind of bump that a little bit, that valve, and see it flow. And so we know we've got good flow at least to this point. But that's kind of a little side note as far as troubleshooting goes, and I think that's kind of handy to know. So we've got that screwed back on there. We've got our valve on. We know our hose is routed well. We can see that we're not likely to have any air pockets. So we're getting pretty close to wanting to start this sprayer up. One little thing that I've just learned over the years, when I'm trying to start the sprayer for the first time, maybe to catch that prime, one thing that I've found is open your agitation all the way. And so that gives it an easy way to discharge that solution, and it just helps it catch prime when it's not trying to push against pressure, or it's not trying to push against this regulation device. And so on this model, this is your agitator. If it's one of our ag spray units, it'll have a little micro valve up beside that aluminum AL control valve. Off to the side, it's gonna have a little micro valve. It's the one with the 1/2-inch hose. Open that up, and that's just gonna let it kind of free flow. And so that helps that pump kind of catch prime. And that'll let the solution go ahead and start getting mixed. And once we got that going, then we can worry about kind of adjusting the pressure. So that being said, we are going to start this tractor up. We're going to do some pressure. Oh, and one other suggestion. I like to start with the pressure regulator backed off, and then I can adjust it to raise the pressure. Rather than start with it all the way up and create a whole bunch of pressure, it may be more than I want, I can start with it backed off, and that'll give me the ability to adjust that pressure up to where I want to be as opposed to down to where I want to go. It just kind of avoids any overpressurized situations or anything like that. Just a couple helpful tips that I think will help you. So we're gonna start this tractor up. We're gonna get the PTO spinning, get some pressure going, and see if we can get some spray going. So now we've got our tractor running, we've got our pump turning. As you can see, with the agitation open, we're not building much pressure, but when we shut that off, we're beginning to build a little pressure. Now keep in mind, this is backed off, so we're not building a lot of pressure. One thing to also remember, and we'll mention this again in a minute, is to keep in mind how fast your PTO is running. And so currently we're at idle, and so we're not running it very fast, and that's where we're gonna start. But here again, another tip here, you gotta kind of figure out what gearing you're gonna be in to go at what speed you're gonna be at. Obviously, there's a tip chart we'll be working off of, and I have another video that goes into how to read those. But working off that tip chart, we've got to kind of see, you know, hey, how fast can you run? You know, your field might not allow you to run 6 miles an hour or 5 mile an hour, you know, 4 mile an hour. You got to kind of figure that out, and we got to figure out a speed on the transmission that's gonna get us there. Maybe it's a CVT, whatever kind of tractor you got, Hydrosat. But we're going to need pretty decent PTO RPM out the back, and so we want to find a gear where that's going to leave that up, just kind of staying within the specs of what we're going to need. Obviously, right now we're sitting still, and today I just chose an easy kind of setting off the tip chart, and so that's basically a 15 gallon an acre rate. It just so happens to be at 6 miles an hour at 40 psi. I get 14.9 gallons per minute with the AIXR 11003 tips. That's that blue tip that we have on. So we're aiming for 40 psi, and we're going to go drive at 6 miles an hour. That's going to get us that 15 or 14.9 gallon an acre rate, going to get us a really good coverage. So we've got it running, and on the T-Jet valves here, they kind of got these independent lever style systems, and so obviously we've turned it off to the side, and so that's so we can see it. If this was facing the tractor, these are orientated so that it aligns with how the boom sections lay out. So this one would be turned this way, is going to be the far right section. This is your middle section, and this is your left section. In most cases, you're probably spraying all three anyway, but just so you know, that's kind of how they're laid out. On our ag spray style system, you've got your AL, and it kind of tells you what position you want to be in. But for this, we're going to flip on these independent valves. So I've got all three of them on. Before we go to set pressure, we need to make sure that we have it set how we're going to be spraying in the field. If you're only going to spray with one section, maybe the center section, just open the center section. If it's a boomless, maybe you only have a center section. Maybe if it's, you know, a boomless and you've got 2 nozzles, maybe you just want the left nozzle. So that kind of gives you an idea, but we got to, more or less, long story short, we need to figure out how we're going to be operating this in the field. We're going to turn it to that, and then we're going to adjust our pressure. So there are 2 ways to get to your pressure that you need to keep in mind. One is the agitation valve. We can adjust it. The other is the pressure regulator. But keep in mind, before we go adjusting this, we want it set here, but we also want to be pretty close to the engine RPM we're going to be running, because that's going to control how fast that pump is running. And so we'll want to get the engine RPM to where we think it needs to be to run that speed we need to run in whatever given gear it is. Then we're going to start adjusting this. And so once we do that, I know right now we're at idle. First thing I can do is I can shut down the agitation, and that's going to give me more flow going through the control valves, and then I can start adjusting a little bit. But if you notice, I'm only able to build 10 psi, and that's just not going to be enough. We've got to get to 40 psi. And so let's see if we can get any more adjustment here. So when I crank that all the way down, it stops moving at about 30. So here again, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to start screwing it in. Even when I start screwing it in, it kind of stops moving at about 30. And what does that mean? It means we don't have enough flow, right? The pump isn't able to produce enough. In this case, our engine isn't turning fast enough. And so we're going to speed up our engine. That's going to give us a little bit more control. As I mentioned before, I like to start with it backed off. So I'm going to step over here. So I've adjusted the engine RPM. Obviously, every tractor is a little bit different. I mean, obviously, if you're running a YM series Yanmar, it's, you know, maybe I'm at 1750 and I'm in 540 Eco. But obviously, every tractor is different, and that's probably not the tractor you have. But so I'm trying to reach 40 psi. And so I'm going to start screwing this in until I get to that 40 psi, and I'm going to set that lock ring. This valve is basically the same on an ag spray or on one of these Best Way sprayers. So now that we've got that adjusted, and we're maybe just a touch high, but we're close. So now that we've got that 40 psi, we're ready to go spray. And you can see we've got a really good spray pattern across that boom. These AIXR tips do a really good job on this boom. These are the air inducted tips. It's going to keep that droplet size just a little bit larger, but definitely we're getting a really good spray pattern across that boom. This is the, like I say, the Best Way. It's the X-fold boom. You can kind of see that like I say, we're just getting a really good spray pattern. So that in a nutshell is how to get your pressure. I want to point out a few more things though. When we go to shut these valves off, that's when this regulator kind of does its work. So we're going to shut these valves off, and this is going to prevent it from completely, basically deadheading the pump. So we're always going to have flow through here. Now notice your pressure changes, and that's an issue, you know, because that is going to affect accuracy, but we're not spraying right now, so we don't care what that pressure is. We only care what the pressure is when we're spraying. So we flip them back on, we go right back to 40. So this pump, this sprayer is set for what we're doing. While we're talking about that though, let's talk about another thing. This 4th valve on the Best Way sprayers is going to our spray gun. And so when we kick that on, then our gun gets the pressure. And so we're able to, as you can see, that's when we're going to get the pressure there. I want to go over just a couple more little tips and things. If you're not sure, your pump, when it is turning and it's got fluid to it, that flow is going somewhere. And so, like with the agitator, if you want to see that your pump is flowing fluid, the best way to do that is to leave that agitator wide open and open your tank. So when we do that, we can see that not only do we have flow coming back in through, this is the return off of our pressure regulator, not only do we have pressure coming in there, but we've also got the agitator and it's sitting there recirculating the tank at the same time. If you want that agitator to really get to cooking, we're going to adjust that way up, and that's going to send all of that flow back to the agitator, and that really gets that circulation going. So that's a great way to tell if your tank or if your pump is actually flowing. So we're going to do this one more time just to kind of go back over this as far as how to set this sprayer. So starting off, we're at our RPM. That's where we're going to be. We're going to open the valves that we want to open in order to spray what we want to spray. We're going to shut off the agitator for now, or if you want to run the agitator, select where you want that to be. Do you want that at half flow? Do you want that at a quarter flow? Select where you want that to be, and then we're going to adjust this pressure regulator to that 40 psi. It might be different in your case. Always refer back to the tip chart. But when we do that, we now have 40 psi. We're going to run 6 miles an hour, and we're going to be very accurate with our spray. So keep in mind, this might be different based upon whatever style sprayer you have, but the principles are the same. So if y'all have any questions, reach out to us. Like I said, one of our core values is that we're here to educate. That's what we're here to help with. So if y'all have any questions, check us out on YouTube. We've got more videos just like this. Or shoot us a message. Shoot us a message, like us on Facebook. And as always, if y'all are in the market for some spray equipment, come check us out. Massey Ferguson, anything like that. We want to be your dealer here in Central and North Texas. Thanks.